Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Luxury Legacy Spotlight this month. We're excited. You've seen all the notifications and stuff, so you know today we are back here talking about generational wealth and building a legacy. And I have some of my favorite people here who are here to drop the mic as we talk all things legacy. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining today. Awesome. So today we're going to talk a little bit about generational wealth. I'm going to allow everyone to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about who you are, where you're from, who you serve, and all that good stuff. Cool. So everyone, I'm Michelle Morton. I am a licensed realtor, DC, Maryland, Virginia. Also the founder of Luxury and Legacy, all about building legacy, creating generational wealth through entrepreneurship, through real estate, and all the things, right? Anything that's going to take our communities, primarily women, people of color, any disenfranchised community, and do whatever do whatever we need to do to get the leg up. Cool? That's me. Awesome. Portia.
Yes. Hi, you guys. My name is Portia Wood. I am a generational wealth planning attorney and founding partner of Wood Legal Group LLP. Our focus is on really educating and activating historically marginalized communities to take agency over their legacy and make sure that we can preserve everything that we are building through appropriate estate planning documents so that everything can truly be intergenerational.
Yay. Thank you, Portia. Carmen.
Hi, everyone. My name is Carmen Rosas. I'm an estate planning and business attorney in California. I am the CEO and founder of Carmen Rosas Law, APC. And I work with primarily Spanish-speaking communities, but we work with Latinas and their families to make sure that their assets are protected. So like Portia, right, generational wealth planning and making sure that people of color and women continue to pass on all that they're working so hard for. So thank you for having me.
Yay, thanks for joining us, Carmen. And we have Auntie Nessa, Miss Vanessa Heatley, to you, or to Auntie Nessa as we endearly call her. Auntie, please introduce yourself to the people.
Listen, I'm not as tech savvy as some of you ladies. So I'm still trying to work the keyboard. But good morning, or afternoon, everyone, depending on where you are. Again, as Michelle said, she is one of my nieces of many, one of my sweethearts, and a longtime investor originally from California. I'm currently in Texas. Longtime investor, and really enjoy the space. I'd gotten away from it for a while. Had a few bumps and bruises along the way, but I do credit spaces like this and some of Michelle's colleagues that have kind of given me permission to forgive myself of some of the mistakes that I made. And so I'm back in full force. And my focus now is with young people who are serious about getting in the game and trying to change that mindset of thinking that they can't get in. And so that's kind of my focus now, but happy to be here.
Yeah, she is my inspiration, y'all. Miss Pam, what's happening, sister?
Hello, I am Pampa Rubias. I became the business coach my mom needed. I support first generation business owners in their business. And the way that I work is I support them in planning their business in cyclical ways. So we insert rest, fun, working, and all of the things in there. And because I work a lot with BIPOC and people of the global majority, we use a tool called EFT tapping to regulate their nervous system to make sure that we feel safe and secure into taking action so we can make all the money.
All the money. Yay, thanks. I love it. Everyone who's seen us before knows I love it when Pam says, I am the business coach that my mom needed. I absolutely love that, right? Because that's what generational wealth is, right? It's about building on what the generation before, what their accomplishments were, what their failures were, and being that same model and mold and inspiration for the next generation. So I love that. Hello, Marcus. What's happening?
Hey, what's up, everybody? How are you?
Thanks for joining us. We are just kind of introducing ourselves, and who do we serve, and how that's impacting the community.
Marcus Fields, Fields Financial Group. I am a senior loan officer. I'm doing my business under NFM Lending, based out of Baltimore. And I've been in the business for 19 years and still have my hairline, and I'm not all gray yet. So this this
He's trying to say
business
something.
is wonderful. I serve in 10 states, so I'm licensed in DMV and 7 others. I can give those later, but I'm just in this business trying to help people make smart real estate decisions, be fully transparent, and help lead people to victory in terms of making the right decisions for their family from a financial perspective. I'm also the loan officer that will tell you no is not the right thing to do because that's that bridge is out down that road, or it's going to lead you into foreclosure. Some people want what they want, but I'm just a guy to tell you the truth to say, hey, sometimes what you want is not what you need. So, but what you do need is you need a man like me to help get you there.
Yay. Thank you, Marcus. And so everyone here is being really, really shy, right? We have a powerhouse of panelists here today, or guests, really, right? And they're not even guests anymore. What is it Grandma used to say? You're a guest the first time you come into my house. After that, you're
Right.
no longer a guest. So everyone is home. So what we'll do now is, again, those of you that are watching, drop any questions. Let us know where you're from. Let us know where you're watching. Are you watching on YouTube, LinkedIn? Are you watching on Facebook? Which group are you in? So that way we can drop some specific content or information just for you. So again, what we're going to do now is we're going to introduce our stories to you, right? You've seen us come up here. You've heard our expertise. We've tried to give you as much value as we can. But now we're going to share a little bit about who we are and what inspires us, why we even are in the business of helping people build legacy and generational wealth, right? Who wants to start with telling their story?
I'll go.
Yeah, there we go.
Portia's being shy.
So our why, or how we got into it, right? So I am a first generation. My dad is from Mexico. My mom was born here, but grew up with my dad's side of the family. He's from Mexico. Only first person in my family to go to college, only attorney in my family, had never heard about estate planning or living trust until I took my class in law school, had no idea what it was. And, initially I thought I was going to go into family law. I was going to go into divorce and custody and make so much money. And I worked at a nonprofit when I was in law school, and we helped low income, primarily women who came in because they became stay-at-home moms. They weren't working, and their husbands decided they were going to freeze all of the bank accounts, and they were going to they had no money, right? So they came in because they're like, I literally have no money to my name, and I need help to get custody of my kids. And so that was with a nonprofit, and I was like, this is what I'm going to do when I become a lawyer, right? When I pass the bar, I'm going to do this. I'm going to help women, empower them. And the number of women that I was just like, you don't know how much money, you don't know, you don't know where your money is going, right? But I realized that it was actually very common, especially within this, we had a lot of Spanish speakers. But even in, English speaking communities, like the women just tended to not know finances. And so when I got out into private practice, or when I was getting ready to go into private practice, was waiting for bar results. My grandmother passed away, and my mom was named the trustee. My grandmother had pulled some pieces of documents off, the internet, and had a piecemeal trust. So she did have a trust, and she had a will, which was great, but there was nothing in it. And Portia knows, right? Funding, titles, right, to property actually need to be in the trust to do anything. And so my mom is devastated, mourning, her mother. And so she was like, what do I do? I was like, I have no idea. So luckily at that time, I had been working with a gentleman who did estate planning, and he's like, hey, I'll tell you what. And I'm so grateful for this opportunity. He was like, I will walk you through it. So it's what we call a Hegstead petition, where we basically say, hey, court, they had this stuff, but they just forgot or made a mistake. And that's what happens when you DIY it. Just a plug there to hire an attorney.
That and more, right, Carmen?
That's just one piece of it. And so he was like, I'll walk you through it. You do all the work, pay, your family will just be responsible for filing fees, which I was like, great. Filing fee was like almost $500, which was not nothing, but still it could have been avoided. And so I walked my family through it. And at that time I started thinking about like my dad's family, right? My grandparents on that side, who came as immigrants to this country, and how English as a second language, they wouldn't be able to navigate it. My mom couldn't navigate it, right? Both my parents have just a high school education. I've been a translator for my dad for like English documents, for years because he was a business owner. And so I did the translating for him. And I just was like, my mind was blown because I was like, how do people navigate this? And I understood that, like, white, Anglo-American, whatever we want to call it, people knew about this, right? Native English speakers were aware of this, especially the wealthy. And that's how they continued to pass on their wealth. And the other key part of it was the home. It was only one home. That was the only asset. Was purchased by my grandmother, who was a single mom to 4 girls, and my great-grandmother, who was also a single mom. So the 2 of these women purchased this home, and if my grandma hadn't done at least this like DIY, bare minimum, that's the bare minimum, right? They would have gone through probate, and they would have had to deal with this court process. And so my why was just like, so many people come to this country, and especially I'm in Silicon Valley, like housing prices are insane right now. Great for realtors. And it's nuts. And I think about, these families who purchased their properties for say 60 to like a couple $100,000, and they're now worth millions. And the sentimental things that happen, right? I think about my grandmother's house, my dad's side, where that's where my cousins and I spent our summers. We went and we stayed, our summer camp was Abuelita's house, and we ran around, rode our bikes, drank from the water fountain, had water balloon fights, and hung out at the little corner store with candy and, Crystal Geyser, the Canadian, what are they called? The one, you know what I'm talking about.
Popsicles?
Yeah, no, it was, there were glass bottles. They had the fruit. Maybe they were Crystal Geyser, but they were like
the Mystics.
The fizzy, they were bubbly.
Yeah,
yes.
fizzy, I don't remember something, but that's what we did. And so I just thought about the memories that we built every holiday, every Christmas, Thanksgiving that we had in that house, and how it could potentially be gone if it wasn't protected. And so when I got into private practice, I definitely had that in the back of my head. I was like, okay, we're going to do estate planning, but I didn't know much about it. And I was, still like, I'm going to go do family law and I'm going to empower women. And I realized that I would actually be empowering women more if I did the estate planning and the legacy protection and asset protection, because when I was doing the family law, they were fighting over pots and pans, which still could happen, right, in probate or, with trust. But it was different, right? They were being real petty, who gets the couch, who gets, this, the other part is, we're fighting over who gets the pot that grandma made her, risotto in for like years versus like, I just want this pot because I bought it, you didn't. And so there's just a difference behind it. And as I built my business, I went into more estate planning, and I was like, this is what we're going to do. And obviously, as business owners, right? A lot of us are business owners here and that are watching, you realize that you start getting more and more focused as your business grows. And I realized that I wanted to work with women, people of color, more, I guess, minorities, if you want to call them that. But that's where my focus was. And so that's where I am now. And I'm like, we're going to protect these assets so people don't lose them to the court, or even to each other within family members, and just having real clear instructions. And then I always say estate planning isn't just for you or, to give them instructions, but it's for the people that you leave behind. So they're not trying to navigate this messy court system, as well as handle these like emotions that are super high. So I think that's it. That's my story.
Yay. Thank you, Carmen. I love that. I mean, grandma's house, right? I think we've all talked about that. Like, we've actually had sessions on Don't Sell Big Mama's House because of that value, right? Because of the memories. And I love that you ladies are turning that around and protecting those memories, those assets, all that good stuff. So thank you so much, Carmen. Portia. I'm sorry, Marcus, go ahead.
I was just saying, that sounds like the house that I grew up in, doing all the same things. I think we all grew up the same in some ways,
Yes, absolutely. You're muted, Portia.
No, piggyback on that, right? Because what Carmen said was so important and valuable. The reality is that there are so many communities inside of the United States that do not know how to navigate the system of wealth transfer.
Yeah.
In fact, in the United States back in 2017, it was found that by 2053, the median net worth for African-American families was set to hit zero if we did nothing, right? It would take the Latinx community another 20 years, 2073, to hit that same result. It was also found that only 13% of college educated African Americans were passing $10,000 or more to the next generation. Said differently, right? 87% of us aren't even getting $10,000 to the next generation. And it's not because we don't have stuff, and it's not because we haven't accumulated assets and built a portfolio for ourselves, regardless of how big that is, right? Whether it be one house or a bank account or one life insurance, it wasn't making it to the next generation in full. And a lot of that is because we didn't have this preparation. So I know we're talking stories, but I just wanted to piggyback on that, is that it's such a valuable message because we historically have not known the tools or had the tools to be able to participate. So for me, you know, I came to law school like this, right? My path was a little bit crazy. I was a journalism major, right? I was like, I'm going to do public relations. Like I'm here. And in college, I was rear-ended by a drunk driver. I ended up working in a civil rights law firm that summer. I had to give up my PR internship in New York because I needed to be in physical therapy. So, you know, the fates had a different idea for me, right? I ended up working in a civil rights law firm, and we were dealing with a police brutality case, an individual who became a quadriplegic in police custody. That really opened my eyes to different possibilities and ways to be of service to my community, right? And so I went back, I started taking all these legal classes, and I was like, I'm going to do that. I'm going to be a voice for the voiceless. And I started out in the public defender's office, which was great. But the state's attorney's office in Baltimore City poached me, and they said, you know, we need people who think like you, who aren't going to just take a statement of probable cause as fact, that are going to actually ask the questions, that are going to challenge things that don't seem to make sense, and really push to make sure that justice is served. And I was like, I am not going over there. That is the devil's side. No, no, no. But you know, they made a compelling argument, and eventually I did make that transition. And while in the state's attorney's office for Baltimore City, we saw Trayvon Martin happen and the protests that came up. We saw Michael Brown happen, you know, I mean, just over and over and over again, these continued issues of police brutality. And I couldn't sit idly by and watch these things happen. And so I got in my car and I drove to Ferguson, and I stood on those front lines and I protested. And, you know, just watching the ideas that we were taught in law school, right, Carmen, about what our democracy is supposed to be and how our criminal justice system is supposed to work, and watching all of our constitutional rights completely get thrown out of the window. It really changed my mindset. And so I got very involved in sort of police reform and participating in how do we quantify what is happening in our community, because we can't argue against something when we don't have the numbers. And so became a participant there with that. And in that, I realized, well, where are the losses? And the economic loss in our community was the one that I kept coming back to. Like, we had a lot of people working on criminal justice. We had a lot of people working on police reform, but we weren't protecting what we already had, right? We can talk about reparations all day long. I'm for it. But what about the preservation of what we've built? And I went back into my own family story and sort of realized that estate planning has been a part of what has allowed me to be this successful. Because my great grandfather was born a slave and lived on and worked on the plantation of his biological father, right? The slave holder, or the enslaver, if you will. And when the enslaver died, he actually passed my great grandfather, or his biological child and wife and kids, to through an estate plan. And eventually my great grandfather was able to buy his freedom, the freedom of his wife and the freedom of his 4 children, and subsequently the land that he had sold as a slave, from his biological aunts who had inherited him and the property. From there, you know, he made a rudimentary estate plan, right? It was like, when I die, my kids are going to divide up this land into quarters, and if they ever want to sell, they've got to sell to the other siblings. Like, we're going to keep this in the family. It wasn't a great estate plan, but it worked, right? My great grandmother sold her plot of land to her brother and took that money. And, you know, her husband used some of that money to found the Afro-American newspaper, which is the longest continuously running family-owned Black newspaper in the country at 130 years, right? Based out of Baltimore. And it is still family-owned and run. And from that, it meant that all of the lines of that family had an opportunity to be educated, right? To learn how to read and write. That education and writing was an important part of our family story and our family legacy. It also meant that everybody had a job, right? Which is one of the reasons that they did it. It was like to make sure that there was a job and opportunity for people who look like us. to give access, right, when nobody else would open the doors, but also to tell our stories, because the mainstream media was not painting a picture of who we are as people, our happiness, our joys, our successes, our families, our community, nor were they telling the story of the laws that were being passed and how they were going to impact us, right? Because while they may be facially neutral, they are not necessarily neutral in impact. And so when we think about, what the Afro has meant and what that legacy meant, when I then started my own journey, right, in this business, I carried all of that with me to say, okay, well, how can we use legacy planning to continue to move the culture and the needle forward? And we can't do it if we're on track to hit zero. Like, we just can't, right? And right now is a state of emergency. And I saw you pop it up, and I should have said that, but right now is a state of emergency because due to COVID in 2020 alone, 1 in 555 African Americans died as a result of COVID-19. That has completely accelerated that timeline from 2017 because our elders who contracted COVID, who passed away, are now stuck in this probate process. Why? Because 70% of us don't have any estate planning at all. 70% of us are wholly unprepared for what is inevitability, right? All of us, none of us are getting out of here alive. Unless you have the fountain of youth. And if you do, please share it with me because I would like to know. But otherwise, if you do not, right, we're not getting out of here alive. We also know that most of us are not going to get out of here healthy and then alive, right? 65% of people, or 68% of people over the age of 65 need some form of long-term care before they pass away. And so while medical advancements have meant that we live longer, we are not living healthier. And so when we think about generational wealth planning, we're not just thinking about, I've got millions of dollars and I need to pass that on. We're thinking about, how does any little thing that you have get to the next generation? Because that little bit, no matter what it is, can be a leg up. Also, how do we ensure that if you get ill, that your family is not going to lose everything that you've been putting together by trying to care for you? Because you don't have an automatic person who just steps up, right? You've got to go through conservatorship or guardianship proceeding to get legal rights to care for a family member if you don't have that stuff in place. So my story, right, was combining my family story, combining my family legacy, and then the actual loss that I was seeing in our community, and saying, we need to do something right now, and somebody's got to fill this void. Last statistic, because we know I love numbers, right? Between April of 2020 and June of 2021, more than 146,000 children were orphaned as a result of COVID-19, right? So estate planning and generational wealth planning is not just about money. It's also about who takes care of your children and their finances if something happens to you. 65% of those children in the United States are in minority communities. The United States ranks 4th in the world for orphan children, behind Mexico, Brazil, and India. 4th. And we are wholly unprepared for what that looks like. So if you are minor children, you also need to have an additional layer of generational wealth protection, which is, who takes care of my kids if for some reason I am no longer capable of doing it? And so that's our story. That's why we're here. That's why I'm here talking about it. Thank you for letting me share.
I love Portia coming in with all the statistics all the time. And that last one is huge. Like, I just had to jump in, but I was like, oh, that last one about the kid, like orphan children, like gave me goosebumps, and it's something that as mothers, we talk about all the time, but actually hearing that statistic, right, and being in the business of, creating these documents, like that's such a huge number. And then also thinking about, sorry, I was like, I know we're doing intros, but like, my brain, right, it's whenever we get together, we always have these things and we could probably talk for hours. But I think about like the immigrants and like DACA recipients, right? There was a huge time where we were like, we need to create guardianship documents, because if you get deported, who takes care of your kids, right? And looking at that.
So, and that's huge. I mean, literally, we could, like you said, we could have a session on that specifically, because even as you brought that up, that's very interesting, because there are a lot of children who are left here without their parents. And I'm curious too, what things are being put in place to protect those children. Would you say Portia, number 4 in the world, the 4th country in the world?
We're the fourth in the world, exactly. And we're the only first world nation that's in the top 5. And that's a problem, right? That's a problem for who we are as a society. But you've got to remember, in 2020 alone, right, the court systems were closed for at least 6 months. So do we have more people passing away and more people caught up in this court system? The court system is backlogged. It's so difficult to get court dates nowadays. So you can't even get access to a family member's assets who's passed away because you just can't even get a court date. And so, we could go on and on about that, but we have to get through.
Yes. And so, those of you that are watching, again, we're here, of course, talking generational wealth and legacy. And today we're talking about how our stories have impacted the work that we do. And, Carmen has shared and Portia has shared. And now we'll go to Marcus. We won't leave the fella in the room for last this time because he's brave enough to hop up here with us. Marcus, tell us a little bit about your story and how does that impact the work that you do?
Well, first of all, I'm so honored to be a part of this. Portia and Carmen, you all have set the bar super high, and I don't know that my story is like that. But all the numbers that were being fired off, I'm a numbers guy, so like she's, that's talking my language, But I'm a man of humble beginnings from Fauquier County, Virginia, which is the gateway to the rural crescent of Virginia. I mean, it's just below the Mason-Dixon line, so I'm technically in the South, right? The county that I grew up in. So start off in Fairfax County. Then my parents moved us out in 1988 to Fauquier County, which is predominantly, doesn't look like me, it's predominantly white. I don't even know the numbers. Portia, you could probably put that on your list of things to do to find out what the percentages are. But I do know that I'm super, super interested and invested in making sure that that I leave a lasting legacy that goes 2 to 3 generations deep beyond my life on this earth, so that my daughter and grandchildren can have something that they can look at and that can even be the next page in terms of what Portia's great did. I'm so impacted by that. So I guess if I start, my journey would go from a small town in Gainesville, Virginia, which is my dad and my grandfather. Well, my grandfather who had a third grade education. I don't know all of the details, a lot of the family history and the documents and pictures they said, burned in some fires and things like that. But from what I do know, my grandfather had a third grade education, but his work ethic was worth $1 billion. So he started a trucking company, and he was the man that could fix anything. I watched him as a young guy with just basic tools, figure out how to work different things, would pull an engine out of a dump truck and put a new one in, working with other people. So he figured out a way. And he's a man that ran that business for 50 years with one dump truck, but he was also the man that had 5 children and was my grandparents' house is like the community center. So somebody needed milk, eggs, something to eat, some money, whatever. My grandmother was cooking it, or my grandfather probably had the money to give you. But if you needed to get your car repaired, he would come down to help repair your vehicle. You had something stuck in a ditch, he could bring his dump truck and pull it out, that type of thing. So, but with that work ethic, he was the guy that could build this business on a third grade education, build it and run it for 50 years by himself. But you could not beat him to the yard. Now, I don't know if y'all know where the distance from Gainesville, Virginia to down 66 to 495 to Alexandria, which is about 10 minutes outside of DC. But that, with no traffic, that's about a 35 to 45 minute ride. And older folks, they don't need an alarm clock to get up. So at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, the stories are that you could hear him start the truck and get it ready to go. But within 30 minutes of getting himself together, packing his lunch or whatever, he was down the road and he would be the first person to the yard. So nobody could beat him. And then there became a thing year after year that everybody's trying to beat Pappy to the yard and nobody could do it. So he became a legend in his work ethic. And I know we hear about our great athletes, they're the first in the gym, they're the last to leave, or someone who's always in the office and always doing a little bit extra. That's my grandfather. So I go back about 2 generations. Well, my dad was the youngest boy. So he was the 4th of 5 children. And after my dad graduated with pretty much honors and had basketball scholarships and things like that, hurt his back, he went into the police force. He was a DC police officer. Um, and his work ethic is also the same way. And then he, at 20 years old, marries my mom. And then he became a pastor in 1982. I was born in 1977. I'm the oldest of four children. And my parents settled down in a town called Herndon, Virginia. Now, my dad being a teenager chasing after my mom, they met in church, and they would. My dad, there's a stretch of road. It's about from my grandparents' house to my mom's parents' house. It's probably about 15 miles. So on a major interstate, my dad wouldn't travel that road. He would just ride the back roads and get to go see my mom. The famous story is my grandfather would always tell my mom and yell like, "Hey, it's time for that little boy to go home. Like, get out of here, dude." But at 19, 20 years old, like my dad had already got her. So they got married. And then by the age of 23, 24, I was born. But after my dad was in the police department, and then he became a pastor, he also helped work. He was doing life insurance sales. So the company that he was with was called A.O. Williams. So Art Williams was he became the owner of the Tampa Bay Lightning at some point. But then the company got sold to what we know today as Primerica. Primerica bought it out. So my dad didn't want to do that any longer, but then my dad got into business with my grandfather. So then they began to triple the business. So during the weekdays, I wasn't with them, but at night, if something broke down, I'm there holding the flashlight. So I'm watching my dad and his work ethic. Like, he's always working. He was always around. He never missed football games and basketball games, and he coached us, and he would read the Bible to us, and he would preach, and he would cook dinner, and he was Mr. Everything. So that work ethic goes into, it's important, and I know it's lacking in today's society. And my mom was the same way. So I grew up. I'm the product of two hustlers. My dad doesn't have a college degree. My mom went back to school after my brothers and my sister they got their degrees. I'm a college dropout, but my work ethic still says I'm an expert in this business. And I've got 19 years in this business. So I'm the product of two hustlers, and I watched them serve people. I watched them help impact people in a way, especially my community, African Americans. My dad, I now understand how my dad would be frustrated about telling people that this life insurance policy, if something happens to you, you don't leave your family in a bad situation. At minimum, have I think it was maybe $10,000 back then, to give them a decent funeral, right? And don't pass on any of their debt. But he would get frustrated about, like, they want to spend and buy this car and buy this stupid stuff, but they want to leave their family in a bad situation. So I didn't realize that when they were doing the seminars that I'm the young man in the room, like, doing my homework, but I'm also watching what he's doing at this whiteboard with the Sharpies and all that stuff, and and diagramming things. So here I am, now I'm 44, and I do my seminars, and I'm doing things like this, and I go travel places, and I'm my dad now, and I'm watching these people in the room, and I get frustrated from time to time that, hey, stop paying $2,000 a month in rent and $24,000 a year and giving that to a landlord and invest in yourself. And you don't have the best of credit. You don't have to have the best of credit or the silver spoon to be able to do it. I'm breaking down these tools, this confusing market, this confusing world of real estate, and I'm putting it in your hand so that you have mastery over it. Understand your income, understand the importance of credit, and understand the importance of having some assets to be able to impact not only yourself, but 2 or 3 generations down the road, because they will thank you forever for it. So when my father was in his trucking business, he would get contracts to, haul asphalt. In the wintertime, he would push snow. My mom would help him with the books. As we got older, my mom went to school. She was working at the school, and she would, leave the pack of chicken frozen in the sink and leave me instructions on how to cook it when she got home so that dinner could be cooked. And my parents built a house from the ground up, and I watched them work hard, buy some land, dig a hole, see the frame go up,
Mhm.
and now 35 years later, that's the house that my wife and my children and my nieces and my nephew we ride around in. That's the place where I go when I'm off the grid and I'm cutting wood. Those are the trees I'm cutting down, you know. And but also they gave me a platform to build upon. My platform doesn't start at, I'm second, third generation. My platform doesn't start at day one. Now, I am working with first generation people that are buying and develop understanding credit, but my platform is now at least two steps above, because now I have the opportunity to let my daughter see me and her mother not only buy a home, but also when we take a 2 hour trip, we now own 140 acres in West Virginia that where we can build. What people ask me, what are you going to do with it? So my mind starts going crazy because I'm a thinker. And what God did for us was he showed me this property 2 hours away. Let me back up. I'm a praying man, all right? I'm a Christian. So I believe that God hears my prayers. He hears this knucklehead speak. So I said, God, I'd like for the property to be 2 hours from my house. I'd like for it to have some woods and some open land. And I'd also like some water on it as well, if you would. So how all of it developed, it's a longer story, but I got 140 with open land. I've got woods. I've got natural spring water flowing out of two places that I haven't found out where the source is. Um, Manicured roads all through it. It's nuts.
Awesome.
So when we say, what are you gonna do with it? Well, I'm gonna find a way to have it make me some money. But not only that, I'm gonna find a way to
Wait a minute,
use
I
it.
heard that.
I'm gonna find a way to allow this property to bless two, three, four, five generations down the road, and make sure the paperwork is tight. Because most of my family, on my dad's side and on my mom's side, the property that we've had is gone.
Mm.
But those days are over. I got attorneys that I'm looking at. I've got realtors that I'm
Yeah.
looking at. Somebody's going to make sure that Marcus Fields and the investment that I'm making and 2 or 3 generations, the work, the blood, the sweat, and tears, that does not go away in vain. So not only do I talk about my stuff, I push it hard to the people that I touch, because like I'm not the smartest man. I'm a college dropout. My GPA in school was a 0.99. Like
Mm.
I worked hard. I worked hard to get that GPA now. I party, smoke, and drink everything I can find.
So,
But you
Marcus, you
bounce
know
back.
what? Yay. Thank you so much. And Marcus, you know, what I hear you saying honestly is that you come from hardworking people. You come from people who believed in real estate and the gift of entrepreneurship, right? And so we say it's the hustle, but really you saw people building businesses and building legacy from a young age. And a lot of times we forget and we kind of like downplay the successes of those that came before us, but their successes are what allow us to be who we are today,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Thank you so
I'm
much,
sorry to be
Mark.
so long winded on that, but I get hype off of it. I'm sorry.
Okay, we keep saying we could probably do this for 2 hours at a time, right?
Yeah,
All right,
sure.
so now what we're gonna do is we're gonna go over to Miss Pam Covarrubias. We're gonna let her tell her story, and then Auntie Nessa and I are gonna share space because we come from the same legacy. So Pam, please tell us a little bit about your story.
Yes. So I think the attorneys are going to resonate with this one. So my grandfather passed away suddenly in Mexico, and he had property, and then they lost everything because it was a sudden, quick. And my grandmother had to cross the border, make a decision quickly to leave her children behind and cross the border to work and become a single mom. And a lot of things that I the reason why I do what I do is because of the lineage that I'm carrying, and it's for my mother and my grandmother. And I believe that my role is to finish what they started. So my grandmother crossed the border to do a better future, to just survive, really, for her kids, because she had nothing. And then when my mother lost her business, then she also brought her 3 kids and 2 bags, crossed the border, and
Yeah.
then she started it, and my job is to finish it. And I realized also that Latinos are the most underpaid, underfunded, undercharged demographic in the US. And so when I say I became the business coach my mom needed, is because I truly support women owned, lots of single mothers, charge more, ask for more, raise their voice, take up space, and finish what their lineage started, because first generations especially have were standing on the shoulders of the people that came here for something, and
Yeah.
maybe they didn't have enough time to finish it, or enough resources, or enough of the language. Even it's a privilege for me to be able to speak English, because I see my mother struggling and asking me, like, what does this one word mean, or filling out the forms. And there's jokes in the Latinx community about, you live in a Hispanic household, when it's like, can you translate the paperwork, or like, can you like tell me what this means? And so working with first generation business owners and really supporting them in the creation of what they're going to not only use to support themselves, but also leave behind, and also support the people that came before them. Because I want to retire my mom, and I want to buy the land that my grandfather lost and my whole family did. So I'll keep it short.
You don't have to. Thank you so much, Pam. I mean, again, Pam, she doesn't go deep, but Pam has family members working for her business. She supports Latinx business owners grow their business and build their brand, and just find themselves. And that comes from her story. That comes from her story. Thank you so much, Pam. And
Can I
now we're
just
gonna have a
Can I just add one thing? Pam, I love your story, and I love that you're working with first generation, business owners, right? Or that are at least continuing. Like, my dad was an entrepreneur, but fluctuated. And so I love that you're saying that. And I think part of the legacy planning, right, is business succession planning, which I do. I don't know if Portia also does, but making sure that you pass on that business that we're working so hard and diligently to build. So part of that, right, is creating your legacy. You have the real estate, you're doing the investing, you have your business that you're building, like, make sure that it gets passed on. And I think sometimes people forget that little, it's not little, but it's a little part, right? Where it's like, we're building the business because we just want to make the money. But then what happens, right? Like, if you're incapacitated or you can't run your business anymore, making sure that you have the right plan in place so you can still pass it on, and, and generations can run it, like the newspaper.
And people sometimes don't even believe that what they have is something that they can pass on. I think
Yeah.
that's one
But I
important
mean,
thing
this
to
goes back
mention.
to what Marcus said, right? This goes back to what Marcus said, is because, like, you have this business that you're doing, and if it can be passed on, well, somebody might need to find someone else that's a coach or pay for someone. So now you need sort of key man or key woman insurance to make sure the business has economic funding inside of it to continue to run. While it gets so fun. But yes, we do the business succession planning as well. But it's all of those little pieces that come together to make the plan, to make generational wealth happen. I love your share. I want you to go back and buy your grandfather's land. I'm very excited. We should talk offline. We got to figure out how to make that happen. That would be amazing.
Should. And this is why I think people that look like us, it's important to do what we do, so that we share the message and people are like, oh, because otherwise the white man's not telling me that I can do it. I've had the door closed on me all the time.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. And Pam, I have a question for you. So you definitely told us the story of your mom and your grandfather and how they arrived here in these good old US of A. What lessons did you learn from them?
Oh my gosh, how much time do we have?
Yeah. From that voyage. I know, let me narrow it down a little bit. There's probably many lessons, but what lessons? Because it sounds very similar, right? They both have that same voyage. What did that teach you? What did you bring with you from that?
I think believing in myself, because one thing that happened to me that I kind of skipped in the story is I just kind of like, I heard somebody else share a story similar to this, and I had a friend who was like, I'll be here for you whenever you need me. And so he's a white man. And so when I asked him to support me, he was like, actually, what happened is that I've supported other people this way. And so they still owe me money for that. So how about, and I was like, wait, so I'm paying for the mistakes of other people when you told me that you're going to, like, what? And so then I realized that I really had no one but myself. And if I didn't believe in myself, it wasn't going to happen. And so what I learned to Michelle's question, what I learned is that really, if you want to make it happen, you just have to make it happen. And I don't have a grandfather to ask for money or an uncle to let me borrow anything. And while the road might be a little bit more unpaved for me, it's something that I have the feet to run and I have the legs to take me there. So what I learned is that I'm here for me and I need to make it happen for me and for them.
Yay! And what I learned from your story is, no, even if the road is unpaved, you know how to get to the other side.
Mm-hmm.
And be
Yeah.
can I just encourage, be your greatest and loudest cheerleader. Like,
Yep.
like nobody's gonna be a bigger hype man. Flavor Flav cannot be a bigger hype man for me than you know what I mean?
You're
Like,
aging yourself.
that's fine. I'm talking about the greatest era in hip hop though. But but I will say this: like, shout and celebrate yourself. Keep going, Pam. Keep celebrating yourself, and
And celebrating the small things.
What'd you
Because
say?
oftentimes celebrating the small things too.
Yeah, for
Oftentimes we
sure.
forget and we're like, oh, we have so much more to go. But like, wait, I've done some cool things
Yep.
up to this point.
Absolutely.
Surviving is one.
Yep.
Can we also say, I mean, just to double on that, right? Be your biggest cheerleader, but also don't let other people deter you. Because I know when I first was thinking about going into this space and I wanted to talk about Black wealth specifically and what was happening in historically and systematically marginalized communities. And everyone was like, there's no money there. Nobody's going to do estate planning. You guys don't have enough to do that. You need to just like do this over here. And I was like, that's how we got here, is by keeping people ignorant, by not having the conversations about what their options are. I was like, you guys might not think that we are valuable, but let me tell you, I know my community and we have a lot. We have a lot, and we just need to know the rules to the game. We need to know the rules, and once we know the rules, there is no stopping us. And so for me, it's like, you don't want people to know the rules.
Right.
That's why you're trying to deter me. You don't want me to teach. You don't want me to go back and teach the rules. So, I would say always be that advocate too. And like, there's every haters out there. Don't listen to them. If you've got the vision and you believe in it, nothing can stop you.
Last stat for Portia, because I know she likes numbers. Latinas alone have $1 trillion in purchasing power. Just Latinas. So let's bring all of us together. And that's why they want to keep us small. Now I'll shut up.
Love it. Love it. Auntie Nessa, please, you are going to round us up with our stories today. Auntie, tell us, what is your story? How has that impacted the work that you do?
Well, and Miss Portia, I've been on stage with her, so she knows my story as well. And it's not as elaborate and as sophisticated as you all, but I promise you, it's as meaningful to me, so that when I speak to young people, I'm speaking from a position of truth, because it's my story. But very simple. I came from a family where home ownership was expected. It was not something that was difficult to understand. And so it was very natural to look for a home, look for a mortgage, work to put down the down payment, maintain decent credit, didn't have great, but decent credit enough to get in. But I would tell you, I'm the oldest person. If Marcus is talking about Flavor Flav, I could take it further back, but I won't. I knew that working was going to get me, having a good job, having that work ethic that Marcus referenced was a big part of my family. I knew that was going to get me much closer to the mark than had I been doing what my peers were doing, going out partying and buying the biggest purses and buying the biggest cars and those kinds. I knew that wasn't going to get me where I wanted to go. And so I knew that buying a home was a big deal, and I knew it was substantial enough that it needed to be done. But when I realized how to get it done is what motivated me to do more. And that was, I think, like Pam is saying, what her motivation is her family story. And some of you, what motivated me was that first purchase. Because when I realized that I had the secret sauce. I had my own personal secret sauce. Then I knew that all I had to do was duplicate that. What the young people call a rinse and repeat. I figured it out. And what it meant was what you all are talking about is that work ethic, believing in yourself, and then stop talking the talk and walk the walk, which is what we're trying to tell young people. No, you can do it. You can do it. It's going to take some work. It's going to take some commitment. It's going to take some sacrifice, delayed, gratification. But of course, you can do it. So when I learned that at an early age, I just thought, man, it's worth it. The 60 hours a week is worth it because I can go from one door to two doors to, and then when I learned this idea of purchasing and then allowing someone else to pay the mortgage, oh my God, I thought, wow, it can be done. And so that was my mission early on. And of course, you all know somewhere along the ways I fell victim to the 2008, 2000 market crash. And so, but I have been able to kind of regroup and kind of change that mindset of feeling like there was so much I missed. Had I known that's kind of the space I was at, man, had I known. So I've been able to kind of come out of that mindset. And now I'm back to, oh, I know how to do this. It's back to basics, just get back to what worked initially and just to the 10th power, just work that to the 10th power. And so I'm so excited because now I'm in a good mental space. I've got some good history behind me. So it's no stopping me. And I want to use that to really speak to the young people who are serious about doing it. Because, what I'm finding is that I hear a lot of young people talk a good game, because they're reading and the internet, everyone's a guru and everyone can tell you the best way to buy real estate and everyone can tell you want to be an investor, so they're of that mindset. So they're hearing a lot of propaganda. But what I'm weeding through are the people who understand it's difficult, but it's not that hard. If I can do it, if anyone can do it, certainly you can do it. You're meant to have a home if you're willing to work for it. You're expected to. And so that's kind of the space I'm in. And I'm so proud of my niece Michelle and my other nieces and my nephews who understand that. And what I'm most proud of is that I was able to impress that upon them early enough. And then in this space where we are, because it was a different, 2 generations ago, it was different in terms of the investing, the purchasing. But now they're in a space where they get it. They've got good jobs. They've got good heads on their shoulders. So there's no way that they're not going to succeed. So I'm very excited. Very excited.
Yay! Michelle, can I just point something out? Auntie Nessa, when you say, we know about 2008, what a lot of people don't remember about 2008 is that the African American community actually lost 50% of its wealth in 2008. And for most people, they have not been able to recoup those costs. And so our community is still economically depressed as a result of bad lending policies and other things. As a resource, because as you're talking about this, there is a program called NACA that is available to help walk people through sort of their first purchase. It is not an easy process, I'll tell you that right now. But much like you said, it's doable and it's worth it. Carmen was talking about, the one house that they had. That one house has the ability to build generational wealth across the spectrum if you can leverage it, right? You could take a one paid off house, get someone else to pay the mortgage, right? And take a mortgage on that home. Don't do it all the way up, but if that home's worth $300,000, take a mortgage of like $200,000. Let a tenant pay that mortgage because the rental rates will support it. Take that $200,000 tax free, by the way, because it's a loan, not a sell. So you don't have the cap gains tax. Take that and leverage it into your next piece of property. People are like, where do I find the down payment money to do this? Well, that's an interesting place to start. Or how do I get the seed funding for my business? Or how do I do any of these things? One piece of real estate that is properly protected and leveraged has the ability to generate and create wealth across generations. Right now, Michelle, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think the numbers for homeownership in the African American community is about 43%. And it's becoming increasingly more difficult for us to get access to the market. I think rates, rates are up too, but house prices across the board are up 24% this past year, and inflation's at almost 8%. And so What we have to do is we have to buy appreciating assets. There is no other way about it. Keeping our money in a savings account, buying a pair of Jordans, they are not appreciating at the same rate as inflation. So we are all losing money if we are not buying appreciating assets. And then, much like Auntie Nessa said, rinse and repeat. Buy appreciating assets, leverage against those assets, i.e. borrow tax-free, and then continue to do it over and over again until you die, and your estate plan then passes it to the next generation that then continues to rinse and repeat the same process. But someone's got to be the first. And if you don't have that coming to you, and or because your parents or grandparents are not still alive, so you can't implement that now, then it's got to start with you. If your parents and grandparents are still alive and you're fortunate enough for that, then y'all need to be sitting down yesterday. Yeah. Because again, we've got about 10 years to get people appropriately covered in the African American community before that trajectory of a road to zero wealth is likely irreversible. Because you cannot buy back the benefits of a paid off property or inherited assets. You just can't. It doesn't exist, right? The property tax rates go up and you try to buy that same house that you might have inherited from your parents and maybe they paid $6,000 a year in property taxes, but if you bought it, you're going to pay $25,000 a year in property taxes. That's a lot less affordable, right? The economic benefit of that is less affordable. So we have to protect what we already have. And I just wanted to add that on, Auntie Nessa, you have actually beat the numbers, right? Because you are such a baddie. You've beaten the numbers. Because more than 50% of the African American community, the wealth in the African community was lost in 2008. And you have turned that a whole 180 and just killing the game. So,
well, I would tell you this, Portia. One of the reasons I love you so much is because you bring the black and white. I mean, the numbers don't lie. And so I love hearing you, to Karma's point, I love hearing you give us this, the truth. Because they tell you the truth will set you free. So I love hearing the numbers because that makes it so relatable. It makes it so honest and it's in your face. So it's easy to say, I want to, but the numbers will tell you what the truth is. And then you have to go through that mental exercise. Well, am I willing to? Because you can. We've dispelled the fact that you can. You can no longer say, I can't. No, we've just explained to you, yes, you can. So what I'm finding with the young people is they don't believe that. To Pam's point, they don't believe that they can. And so that's where the big challenge is. So I just love, Miss Portia, when you bring the numbers. So I love it.
Yay. Thank you all so much for joining us. Just to wrap this up today, I just want to tell a little bit about why I do this, right? And the short version is I remember being a little girl and watching Auntie Nessa purchase property, right? And it started with one in California. I remember growing up as an adolescent and like she said, my grandparents, hardworking people, right? They were both first generation, highly educated people, right? My grandmother didn't get her college degree until she was a grandmother. She went on to get a master's, right? They're both masters. They're both highly professional, but so they always put those values of education, real estate. And I remember being a little girl and, at this point, I wasn't living with my grandparents. I was with my parents. I was in inner city Oakland, right? This is when Oakland was still Oakland, And I remember it was me and my little sister, and my parents were young. They were 20 when they had us. And it was just me, my sister, and my mother. And I remember waking up in the morning and getting my little sister. I was probably like 7, right? But I was an inner city little girl, and we would walk around the corner to church. And to this day, I cannot tell you as a 7-year-old what inspired me to grab my little sister every Sunday morning and walk around the corner to church, right? And what I do know is it came from the prayers of those people that I have never met. It came from the prayers of the slaves. It came from the prayer of my ancestors. And because of them, we have the opportunities that we do now. We will one day be those ancestors. So the things that we put in place, the prayers that we make, whatever it is that we do to set a stage for them, that's what we're living for and that's what we're working for. I thank you guys so much for joining us today.
I just wanted to say one more thing. I did a podcast interview with a woman a while back who deals with like dying, right? She's like deals with people on their last, like kind of right before their journey ends. And what she said to me was, the way you live your life, like think about the ancestor that you want to be, right? So we talk about all of the ancestors who came before us and like all the work that we're doing, right? Pam finishing, you know, what her mother and her grandmother started, right? Portia kind of continuing that same work, you know, Auntie Nessa, like doing, you know, showing what is possible. And it's asking ourselves, right? To your whole point, Michelle, is that what kind of ancestor do we want to be, right? And so much of it is like, how are we living our life? How are we showing up for our future generations? And how can we make it different and better and easier for all those who come after us? So I just wanted to say that very quickly.
Thank you. And again, you guys see us all the time, so you know who we are. We told you what we do and what we represent. As we close out today, ladies, can you just tell the people, where do they find you? If they want to find you, what's the best place? Carmen, we'll go back to you.
Yeah. So social media, I am Carmen Rosas. If you just Google Carmen Rosas Attorney California, I am the only one. So I will pop up. You'll get my website, yourlegacyprotectionfirm.com. But if you just search my name, attorney, you'll find me. But Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, TikTok, what else is there? I think that's it. And then my website.
Yay! Pam, what about you? Where do we find you?
The easiest one is through my podcast, cafeconpam.com, CAFECONPAM. I'm Pam. And that's where you can find all the things, all the places, the spaces, social media, TikTok, all the things. Yes.
Yay. Madam Wood, where do the people find you?
Yeah. So Instagram, Wood Legal Group, woodlegalgroup.com, TikTok, Black Trust Fund Kids, Clubhouse, Black Trust Fund Kids. Yeah, that's it. But if you go to the website, you can pretty much find anything that we've got going on.
Yay. And Tinessa, is it top secret, covert? How do people find
Well, no, it's not, because if they look for you, they'll find me. So I'm on, so that you ladies know, I'm on Michelle's team. So if you reach out to her, she can reach out to me. So that's where I will be found.
Yay. And I am on Auntie's team. So you can find us at luxurylegacy.com, dmvluxuryhomes.com, and we have many other things to come. Thank you, ladies, again for joining us. Shout out Marcus, fella, who was in the building, and we'll see you guys soon. Bye.